Settlers Lament and 21st Reaction. Happy Lamster, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks. It's good to be here, Lambuda. I hope it will be a good Lambuda stir.
Thank you.
But, but yeah, no. I mean, it's very cool that you're doing this. I certainly would not have the patience to do like 30 live streams in a few days.
Yeah, well, we'll see if I'm still conscious towards the end of tomorrow. That's the real test. By the way, Settler, people keep asking me when I'm going to do that stream with you. Lambda submits to the Pope.
Soon. Soon.
All right.
Yes, I don't know. I need to get back to you on that one.
We gotta prep with
no spoilers for the audience on the content.
But obviously, you would prep. You would do an appetizer with a stream on the 10 best posts to submit to. So
yes, today's topic is the 10 most based popes. I put in all of the stream titles for my guests without consulting them. So I was very excited that you ran with this and didn't have any complaints. So I'm excited to see what you've got for me. Are these in order? Are they like ascending
I mean,
order?
yes, chronological order, not order of basedness.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I mean, I feel like I need to give a disclaimer before we get started. As you have just admitted, Lambuda, you are the one who came up with the title, not me.
Yes.
So, I mean, I thought it was great clickbait. I would not tell you to change the title, but I do feel like I need to tell the audience that I'm not really going for top 10 most based popes. It's more 10 popes and documents from those popes with based things contained in the documents. The popes themselves being of questionable based quality.
Okay.
I'm sure they're all great. I'm not saying any of them are bad, but I mean, to give some spoilers, four of them are not even canonized.
I get the impression sometimes looking at your Twitter that people say you can't be a Catholic and have even the slightest criticism of any popes. Is that true?
Do you mean like Catholics saying that or non-Catholics saying that?
I think it's mostly non-Catholics saying that, to be fair.
That's definitely a thing. I mean, the reason I ask for clarification is some people take my defense of Pope Francis and other popes as me like implicitly believing the same thing you're describing. That you have to like defend everything the Pope does. Like I see people in the comments and stuff say this, where they'll be like, Settler just has to defend what Pope Francis is doing. Otherwise, like Catholicism would be debunked. That's just not true. The Pope can do bad things. The Pope even can do bad things in official documents. He can't bind the church to error. And there are, I want to be clear. A lot of poorly educated Catholics will say that all that matters is ex cathedra statements, that is infallible statements from the Pope, and everything else is fair game. That's not true. That's really stupid. You're a moron and you don't understand the magisterium if you think that that like the Pope can just be wrong about absolutely everything, but ex cathedra statements, that's the one sacrosanct thing. But I don't want to get into like the magisterium today. That's even though we're talking about popes, that's a bit off from the topic, but just generally the idea that the Pope that the See of Rome can be a see of pestilence, everything can suck about it. But ex cathedra statements, that's fine. That's not what we mean when we talk about papal infallibility. It's more complicated than that.
But hey, please don't unsubscribe. It's just about base things that the popes have said. Please keep listening.
Yes, but in true Settler style, I didn't give the title of the stream in like 12 paragraphs. I just said something to make people click on the video, and now that they're here,
I mean, it would not be a
Settler
title if it didn't ask the question. If it did not have something to do with basedness.
The viewers are wishing that they could click away, but now we've got them in our thrall, and we're gonna punish them with this actual content rather than just sort of further entertainment. They're going to learn something. How about that? Saint Peter.
I mean, very, very, very unfortunate. Sorry, a little bit more preamble.
Okay.
I wanted to say that I'm very grateful to be here because my channel notoriously has the worst audience in the world. So that means necessarily if I go on any other channel, it must be a better audience than mine. So it's always very nice to experience your audience, which is slightly less stupid than mine.
Now, my audience is smaller than yours, so you'll notice my kind of deferential tone, the way that I address you. But you should see my analytics. If I continue to gain subscribers like I have over the last week, I will overtake you in about a month. So be warned. I will just have to continue streaming for 8 hours a day.
My friends can be more popular than me sometimes. I just need to leech off of them then.
True.
Sorry, go ahead.
Did you have any other preamble?
Yes. One short thing. A prayer request for Elliot's grandpa that is computing the soul, aka Mauritian Struggle, aka Renaissance Man. His grandpa is possibly dying, so a prayer that he will return to the Catholic Church and will confess his sins before he dies.
Yes, I know Elliot, but I hadn't picked up on that. So sorry to hear.
Yeah. And also, I do need to rake you over the coals for one thing, and that is before you sent out the invites for Lambudaster, 21st was talking to me, and he was saying, "Oh, Settler, do you think I'll get invited to Lambudaster this year? I'm so excited." And I said, "Yes, I'm sure you will." 21st, I'm sure it will happen. I'm sure you'll get invited. And then the invites came out, and we saw that 21st didn't get one. And then I had to go to you, like that blue-haired girl from Evangelion. People know the meme.
And like Oliver Twist. I got one invite, but please, sir, can I have one more?
I had to demand that you find a way to work them onto the stream, and that's why this is the only double bill in all of Lambudaster, as far as I can tell.
No, that's not true. I've had a few double bill streams, so
okay.
I hope that does some small way to make you feel better 21st. But I will say, I only sent out a very small number of invitations, in fact. But I put out invites in a few group chats, and then I did directly invite Settler's Lament. But 21st, if my invite list for individuals was...
stop. This is cringe. Look, let me go Jada Pinkett Smith mode and like counter signal the person that's simping and fighting for. I denounce Settler's nepotism, his egregious simping, actually he's the one that was saying,
did he?
Oh, you should. It's actually the opposite, but that's part of the juicy ratings drama that we're having here. So
he told you that I was desperate to have you, but was too nervous to say.
Well, no, he was saying that I should go on. You should go on, bro. Whoa.
This is a lie. This is slander. 21st had been messaging me for weeks, talking about whether or not he'd get on. I was constantly assuring him I must have talked with him for hours, reassuring him that he's getting
What's the point of letting me on? I'm just like Settler's shill. So if you already have Settler's Lament, check. You already have that sphere. You know.
Talked him down from the balcony. It's okay. He might relent. He might let you on. Oh dear.
Okay.
Saint Peter.
So we've almost blown 10 minutes, and we have 10 popes to get to. So yeah, as you said, Saint Peter is the first pope we have. Also, one bit more of dirt. You were supposed to read some of the documents I sent you, though apparently this was a surprise.
Yeah, sorry. I just see your message now. I know this is a lot, but most of these documents are very short. Just read as much as you can.
That is not true.
I mean, Clement, the first Clement is the only long document.
I clicked on the first one, and the scroll bar is like this at the side.
Yeah. That's first Clement. That's really long. That's the only long document. The rest
you should have put that one at the bottom.
But
then it's not
arranged
chronologically. I see the problem.
But
okay, so but there's no documents. Oh well, 1 Peter and 2 Peter, which I have read because they're in the canonical Protestant Bible, the true canon.
Well, I mean, fortunately, Despite Luther wanting to, Protestants never took anything else of the New Testament, so we at least agree on that.
All right, but Saint
So
Peter.
why is what? So okay, I don't think there's going to be much disagreement here, but why is Saint Peter based?
Yeah, so I mean, as I said, this isn't necessarily an attempt to defend the basedness of all these popes, but it's just to point out some based things from 10 different popes. Again, the personal basedness being questionable here. But yeah, I mean, in particular, rather than discussing the baseness of Saint Peter, there are just a few things from First and Second Peter I wanted to pick up on. In particular, where I have too many notes, which is making this difficult to find. Yes.
How about wives submit yourselves to your husbands? That's quite based.
Yes, no, that's very true. In general, there's a strong theme of submission in his document. For that matter, there's a strong theme of that in many of the documents that we'll be mentioning today. But yes, so in particular, 2 Peter 1:10. Therefore, brothers, be all more delighted to confirm your calling and election, for if you practice these qualities, you will never fall. Now there's a particular point I want here, and that is how Christians often think of themselves and their salvation in relation to God. And this isn't, I want to be clear. My goal today, even though we're going over 10 different popes, is not really apologetic. So I'm, this isn't like a partisan Catholic point that I'm trying to make. But the way a lot of Christians sort of view their salvation is, do I choose Jesus? And that's fine. I'm not saying that's totally wrong. But especially like from evangelicals, a lot of the time they'll ask you, like, are you saved? Have you accepted Jesus? Those types of questions. Now the really interesting thing about those questions is that doesn't appear anywhere in the Bible. No one is ever evangelized like that. Now, I'm not saying that necessarily means it's wrong. The word Trinity isn't in the Bible. Intercession of saints, save one psalm, where it is explicitly in there, but that's besides the point. Intercession of the saints isn't in the Bible, and I know Protestants are going to say that means it's wrong. Again, other than one psalm that explicitly includes it. But that's besides the point. But generally speaking, in both Paul and Peter's letters, the way they address the Christians is, and the way salvation is talked about, is the people God has chosen, not you being the one that chooses God. Now, again, I'm not denying that you don't choose God in a certain sense, but I think being the elect of God, being the chosen ones of God, this is a certain sense that most Christians nowadays have just totally lost, and I feel like there's something we really need to recapture.
My perception is, and I don't know if this really bears out because I haven't actually checked thoroughly, but it feels like there are passages that are addressed to new Christians which describe how God is offering you this, like John 3:16 is a kind of an offer to the world, whoever chooses. But then there's other passages which seem to be addressed towards more mature Christians who are really digging into their theology. And at that point it says, well, look, I know it seemed like it began with you, but actually from a step backwards, you see that it was really God who chose you first.
Fear not, little flock, for it hath pleased the Father in heaven to give you a kingdom. That's what Jesus was saying, right, to the apostles before he ascended, right?
My sheep recognize my voice.
Yeah. It's giving them a particular. He is the one giving them a certain group of people kingdom. Not everyone. Certain people are receiving a kingdom. So yeah.
So you're defending John Calvin as the premier.
I'm defending
theologian.
St. Augustine.
No, I mean, I do want to say on predestination. Speaking of which, I could have sworn you said, Lambuda, that you're an ex-Calvinist. Is this accurate?
I probably would want to think harder before answering that question. No, basically, I think I still would affirm all 5 points of Calvinism.
Okay,
but I wasn't ready for that question, so
okay. No,
I'm
I thought I remember you saying once that you were like an ex-Calvinist. I must be wrong.
I don't think so.
But
perhaps
perhaps
an ex-libertarian or something like that.
Ooh.
Yeah, no, I mean, just the reason I asked that is I want to be clear. Yes, certain aspects of Calvinism is heresy, so I don't want any Catholics getting too angry at me when I say it's based that you're still a Calvinist. But I mean, of course, I want you to be Catholic, and there are certain elements of of Calvinism that are heretical and incompatible with Catholicism. But generally speaking, I think when most people say Calvinist, what they mean is Augustinian. That is, I don't think most normal people can tell the difference between Augustinian predestination and Calvinist predestination. Now, yes, there are differences. I'm not saying there aren't. So don't get angry at me. Don't call me a heretic. Yes, I know certain aspects of Calvinism are condemned. But generally speaking, if you read something from a Thomist or Augustinian that teaching their form of predestination, they're going to be using just all the same exact Bible verses that Calvinists use. And the arguments they use will be very similar.
This is an interesting aside because it's something I've been wondering a lot. So I obviously talk to Christians from lots of different denominations who hold their particular set of beliefs extremely strongly, and sometimes the discussions are so esoteric that I can't believe that most lay people have any opinion one way or the other. And yet the way that it's being discussed is in such fiery terms as makes you think that salvation depends on the distinction between transubstantiation and consubstantiation. So, like, I don't doubt that it's important for the teachers in the churches to get this correct, right? I don't doubt that there is a correct answer to many of these, that any other answer would be self-contradictory. But what I'm not clear on is it necessary for salvation to understand this correctly on an intellectual level? Or do most people just get an intuitively correct sense of what's occurring?
Yeah, no, I mean, in Catholicism we have the concept of the sense of the faithful, which both one, not really relevant to this, is the idea that the faithful as a whole are infallible. That is, if the Christian people as a whole accept something that can't be wrong. But also the sense of the faithful is the idea that the most faithful people and those who are most connected to the sacraments, the liturgy, that type of stuff, are going to have an intuitive sense of small o orthodoxy, and that that they might not be able to explain it properly, but that those who are most connected to the church will just sort of understand the teachings. And I think I think that's basically right. And I mean that's not infallible. Let's not say that every devout Catholic is going to understand everything, but that you should have a sort of proper sense of more or less what is orthodox. But no, I mean I definitely agree that yeah, we had wars and stuff over transubstantiation and consubstantiation, and I'm sure for most people they could not explain the difference between those two. Right. I'm not saying that. I mean, I do think they're very important. I do think something like that in particular does result in very big differences in devotional practices. Yes. Even though to most people, consubstantiation seems basically the same as transubstantiation. I think it's very telling that the Lutheran tradition quickly jettisoned the strong Eucharistic devotions that exist in the Catholic Church. And I mean, Luther in particular did defend the practice of adoration, that is worshiping the host. But it was jettisoned by later Lutherans, and I doubt that's not connected to the theological disagreements on what exactly communion is. But yeah, no, I mean I agree that individuals for their salvation don't need to have perfect theology. I mean even the Trinity, which I'm sure we probably would all agree is at the very center of the Christian faith. I'm sure we also probably know that if you ask your average lay Christian about the Trinity, they're almost certainly going to give you heresy.
Right. But that doesn't mean that they're not saved.
And a lot of the text that we will not have time to go over, but the stuff that's included in all this information and links gets into that, where one of the evils that is consequent from the false teachers that St. Paul, St. Clement, and all these other people go through is that they deceive the foolish and ignorant, or they just deceive like the general mass of people. And so like it becomes a lot simpler when because of the nature of the fact that most people follow, the crux of the issue is determining the right authority of just who are they going to submit to, because the children or the spouse or whoever is under a person, they don't have to understand all the specifics of what the leader is deciding, but the submission is the crucial element that keeps them away from error. So that's why it becomes so important here. But I just want to give one St. Peter quote so that we can come back. Is basically from Luke chapter 22, verse 31. He says, Jesus says to him that Satan has desired Peter, to sift him like wheat and everything, but that he has prayed for him so that after he falls away, he converts back and quote unquote confirms his brethren in the faith. So it's another one of these passages. People like to bring up the McKees passage. Oh, I give you the keys to the kingdom. That's the famous one. But this is a less known one where, still Jesus signals the importance of Peter. And, Satan wants to attack the most important things. He wants to offend God most grievously. So why do you think he would desire Peter so much out of the whole group of them? He desired Judas and he desired Peter and everything. And then Jesus is saying for him to confirm his brethren. It's not like just some evangelical, oh, I'm going to confirm myself, I'm going to go straight to Jesus. He tells him to confirm even the other people that are there with him that were just following Jesus physically that time. So it's one of my favorite hidden Peter is the Pope quotes.
Peter being given this position of authority based, Peter denying Jesus not based.
So true.
Should we do St. Clement, since we've now got 20 minutes into the stream?
Yeah, sorry. There is one last thing quickly from Peter, because this is a frequent theme in these in several documents. He says in chapter 2 of 1 Peter, "Be ye subject, therefore, every human creature for God's sake, whether it be to the king as excelling, or to governors as sent from him," etc. I don't need to read the whole thing, but basically that. Just there, as I said, there's a strong theme of authority or of submission to authorities. And I think this is one major issue that especially people on the right have, is that we're really unwilling to be subject to our authorities. And I would recommend, even for even for non-Catholics, especially for Catholics, but even for non-Catholics, to really practice being in submission to the religious authorities over you. Like for example, when my priest tells me to do something, I really try and take that seriously. I'm not saying I always follow through with that, but in general, I don't care if you're Protestant or if you're Eastern Orthodox or whatever. If you're religious authorities, or if you're temporal authorities, or whoever authorities exist in your life, when they tell you to do something, your assumption should be submission. That, I think, is the constant theme we get throughout the Bible. Is the importance of submission. That doesn't mean that any of these are infallible authorities, other than, of course, the church, which is infallible. But most of the authorities you work with in your life are not infallible. But that doesn't mean the assumption a lot of people have is, if it's not infallible, I can do whatever I want. That's really just a ridiculous assumption.
Okay, so what about Saint Clement?
Okay. Yes. Let's see.
We have to
I feel like that commentary works.
The last ones are like the super good ones, super juicy ones. So we need to.
Should I just read this whole document quickly?
Yeah. No. So okay. So let's see.
By the way, listener,
rose
it's
up against
65 chapters of text.
I swear that was the only long document. Rerum Novarum is a little bit long, but that's only like 20 pages. But yeah. That's not long.
Okay, but he has a bunch.
Did you guys ever go to university?
Yeah, whatever. But they have you. Yeah, whatever. Okay, Saint Clement the First.
Yes. So Saint Clement, a disciple of Peter, fourth pope. So yeah, there isn't too much that I got in my notes for him. I think what I just said about Peter can basically apply also to Clement. The only quote I have here is about those who are rising up against against their bishops, and Clement was condemning them and telling them that you need to restore the existing bishops. In general, I mean, I would really recommend people to read First Clement. I think it's a very interesting document, and it's one of the earliest non-biblical documents we have. But in general, just that same theme of submission to authority is really strong in his document. 21st, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually quite a spin-off of the document where he's talking about, envy as a particular issue in terms of schismatics and everything, how they kind of envy the authority of their betters and everything. But one of the verses he's including that in that as analogies or examples of it was Numbers 16. And to just say it briefly, like there was a conspiracy made by the son of Izhar, a Levite of Cath's family, with Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, against Moses. So Moses took them out of the desert, and they were all salty about it because, oh, things suck now. And so those two brothers and their lot had a rebellion against him, and there were 250. And they confronted Moses and Aaron, making their protest thus, saying, "You presume too much. Are not all the Israelites men set apart? Does not the Lord make his dwelling among all of us alike? We are the Lord's people. Who are you that you should take command of us?" So that, and then obviously afterwards, to prove that Moses had the divine blessing, or he was the authority, the two brothers and their entire family were swallowed out into hell immediately while living. But yeah, so pretty clear message on that kind of issue. And I mean, have you heard that mentality before? Who are you to tell us what to do? Where the Lord dwells with all of us. Where are all the Lord's people? Who are you that should take command of us? It's like this general mindset of it's just the spirit of all the faithful, everyone's part of it, and there's no clear leader and everything. No, Moses was the clear leader in that situation. So it's a good example from St. Clement of that kind of dynamic of a explicitly hierarchical church.
Yes, you're roboting for me a little bit, 21st. I don't know, Settler, if you're also hearing that. It might be worth just dropping out and in again and see if that fixes it. But in the interests of getting through all 10 before the end of the stream, was there anything else on Clement 1? Or should we move on?
Not in particular. Did you want to respond to 21st's Protestant bashing?
Well, I don't know that I caught quite enough of it to give a cogent response. I was leafing through this document whilst he was talking, and I have to say I agree with everything that I've come across. This seems like a document I would affirm, not having actually read it entirely.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure you'd affirm the office of the bishop. That's central to the document.
Where's that?
Oh, that's how the document starts, as he talks about how they deposed their
bishop. I always skip the intro. I enjoy that it's addressed to the authors of sedition.
Oh man.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the most based things about really just anything in the past is how much more based their language was.
Yes.
I mean, I always reflect upon how Saint Paul told the Judaizers to cut their genitals off.
Yes, that's quite wonderful. Have you ever had an author of sedition on your channel to put them straight?
I don't know. I mean, I try to only have people that aren't like nerds and losers on my channel. I certainly have had authors of sedition in my I think chat.
The modern day authors of sedition are all in your chat, as far as I've heard.
Wow.
That does seem to be the case. So yes, next document, the Tome of Leo.
Am I still roboting though?
Sounds
it's
fine,
better, but it's on the verge. We'll have to see.
What the?
Okay, the next document's the Tome of Leo. So Leo the Great. This was over Christology. Again, the really abstract stuff you're talking about. Though this document's very short, it's like a page long. It's 6 chapters. So this is one of those short documents I was referring to. But yeah, I mean, again, the same issue of authority is present here. So that's being discussed here. The particular issue of this document is Christology, but again, that's sort of really abstract stuff that I don't really want to get into. here. Um,
Similar
but
to the transubstantiation question.
yeah. I'm not saying that that like Chalcedonian Orthodox Christology isn't important. I think it is, but it's also something that most people will never understand.
It's going to be a hard sell for our non-Christian listeners that they can apply this distinction in any context other than Christianity.
But I don't know. Let's see. I only have one quote here from this document. I'm not even sure if this is relevant, but he said, "But what more iniquities than to hold blasphemous opinions and not to give way to those who are wiser and more learned than oneself?" So yeah, I mean, this is just the same thing I've been talking about authority. And I mean, I don't want to be as I want to attack Protestants as much as 21st wants to. Of course, I would prefer you guys to submit to the Holy Roman Church, and to those bishops that can trace a line of apostolic succession. But just again in general, I guess to give that bit of wisdom to the audience, and this can even apply to non-religious ways. That you really should have a. Okay, I remember actually specifically what I want to bring up with this quote. So in general, I think we may have noticed on certain issues like the slippery slope, how the concepts of fallacies on the internet has absolutely destroyed modern discourse. It's not to say that that logical fallacies and arguments aren't a real thing. It's not to say that like the classical argument, the classical logical fallacies aren't bad. But I do want to say appeals to authority are actually based, and all these nerds that counter signal appeals to authority are morons. No, okay. Is there a bad form of appeal to authority? Yes, there is. I'll disavow what I just said. Okay, yes, appeals to authority are bad.
But the number of actual appeals to authority, the bad ones, are quite small compared to the number of claimed appeals to authority.
Yes, and in general, there should there's nothing wrong. In fact, it's good that there should be a trust that we have in the authorities that are over us. Yeah, and yes, I know what people are going to say. This sounds like settlers saying to trust the science. The reason I don't trust those authorities is because I believe quite strongly that they've already debunked themselves on a lot of things. Now I know that's what people are going to say about the Catholic Church, which okay, I don't want to get into like the papacy and stuff and why I think the Catholic Church is right today. But just in general, at the very least, the authorities that you acknowledge as your own authorities. If you're a Baptist, then you're a Baptist pastor or whatever. If you're a Presbyterian, then your elders, whatever. The people you acknowledge as the leaders in your tradition are people you should show deference to. And you should assume that they're probably right. Like, if you're reading about Christology, like we're talking about, and you think like Nestorianism or something like that seems plausible, but your religious authorities say pretty clearly that it's not. You should probably assume your religious authorities are the correct one, and not assume that you're the one that finally figured it out.
There's a rarer, but I think also valid point to make in reverse with hierarchies, that if you are in a position of authority, if you've been appointed one way or another as a leader, it's also wrong to cede that authority and not to exercise it appropriately. And in some ways, I think that's the issue with the trust the science, is people who should be making strong masculine decisions instead wimping out and saying, "Oh, I'll delegate this decision to somebody else who's not been appointed with proper authority."
Yeah.
Right.
Boniface,
say on the Tome of Leo.
Well, I was rebutting so hard, but I don't know what
You're
you're
back?
saying about what.
Your roboting has stopped, so that's amazing.
I closed. I'm sorry. I had like 30 other tabs open with live streams and
Were you live
updating
streaming
live
with other
feeds.
people?
No, with live feeds coming in, 5,000 APIs. But anyway, so it's like,
Okay.
I was just saying, I wasn't trying to like crush on like low church Protestants. I was just saying how in Numbers 16, two sons that rebelled against Moses's authority and
Yes.
appointment by God were swallowed up into hell while still living with all their family.
Yeah, it's a fun little passage, isn't it? Because there's this dispute. You don't know what's going to happen. They kind of identify who's responsible, and then just out of nowhere, fire destroys them and their families.
I mean, it's pretty scary to me, but yes, it's also.
Yes, but in reality, I don't imagine it was funny at all. It was probably absolutely terrifying. But with the distant, is it too soon to make fun of?
But quite a like Deus Ex Machina conclusion to the story,
True. All right, Boniface.
Boniface the Eighth.
Okay,
kind
yeah.
of represents.
So actually, I need to give a bit more backstory, even though we only have 25 minutes. And that is when you initially said that we could send you reading materials. What I was going to send you was just everything I could find on outside the church. There's no salvation, and then that wasn't actually going to have
700
anything to do with
documents.
the topic of the stream. I would just make like some joke reference to it at the beginning. But that was my initial plan.
By the way, I offered for people to send me reading material, as you indicate, and you were literally the only person who did that, which is why I completely forgot that I'd made that offer. I was intending to put aside time for reading, but since nobody, apart from you, it felt it necessary for me to prep for my streams, I just didn't bother.
Okay. But yeah, that was the so this document is a remnant of that initial plan. This is Unum Sanctum from Pope Boniface, one of the non-saints on this list. Not that means he's necessarily terrible or something, but he 6 of the 10 popes here are canonized. He's not one of them.
I never knew that there were non-canonized popes. Well, there you go. You learn something every day.
Yeah, I mean, I think from like post Trent until I don't know, like the 1800s, there's no canonized popes. I could be wrong about that, but I do know for like a couple centuries there was a pretty big dearth of canonized popes.
It might be molding the bias now that almost every single modern pope was canonized.
Yeah, that's true. But I think only about 2/3 of all the popes have been canonized. In the early church, all popes are canonized because, one for like the first couple hundred years, a lot of them were martyrs. And then even after Christianity became the imperial religion, that I think they were still canonized. I think Pope Honorius was the first one that wasn't canonized, but we don't need to get into that. So Unum Sanctum is a letter from Pope Boniface. And one interesting thing about this for Catholics is, and even non-Catholics, is if you've ever heard a Catholic say there's only ever been 2 ex cathedra statements, that is 2 infallible statements from a pope, then they're a moron and you shouldn't listen to anything they're saying, because there has certainly been many more than 2, and this is one example of a very clear ex cathedra statement from the 1300s. In particular, that ex cathedra statement is something I quote all the time on my streams and other people's streams sometimes too. That is, it is absolutely necessary for the salvation of every human creature to be subject to the Roman pontiff.
Could you explain a little bit what do you mean by ex cathedra?
So ex cathedra literally means from the chair. That is from the chair of St. Peter, and it means a statement that is a teaching in a document that a pope makes that is infallible. So the reason it's infallible is because the pope is binding the church to that dogma. And a dogma is necessarily a okay. I mean, again, too much stuff about what exactly dogma is. A dogma is infallible. But
whatever he bounds was bound in heaven. Whatever he looses was loosed in heaven.
But yes, so a ex cathedra statement is when the pope personally exercises the infallibility given to him by Christ.
But how do you identify whether or not a document is being bound or?
So one again, a sort of misnomer is people a lot of time ask, is this document ex cathedra? That's wrong. There's no such thing as an ex cathedra document. There's ex cathedra statements inside of documents. So it's not like Unum Sanctum isn't stapled to the back of a Catholic Bible. Unum Sanctum is not infallible. What's infallible is that statement. It is absolutely necessary for the salvation of every human creature to be subject to the Roman pontiff. And the way you identify that is, I think there's 4 criteria laid out at Vatican I for an ex cathedra statement. But in general, it needs to be something that's doctrinal. So if it's not doctrinal, then it's not possible. If it's like I really like dogs, that not doctrinal. And the Pope needs to explicitly invoke his authority as Pope. So he needs to like maybe make reference to one of the verses in the Bible that talk about the authority, like Luke, like 21st was talking about, or like Matthew 16 or something like that. It just in general, some sort of reference to the Pope's authority as Pope. And it needs to be definitive and declared for the Church. So in particular, I think the formula "we declare" is used here. Yes, in modern days, since the Middle Ages, the standard formula for an ex cathedra statement is "we declare" or "we declare and define," something like that. If a pope uses that, that probably means the statement is intended to be ex cathedra. So he doesn't literally say this is ex cathedra, but if he uses that language, that's sort of a way that's what he's trying to do. But yeah, so I mean, basically, it needs to be on a matter of doctrine. It needs to be definitive, and it needs to be declared as a teaching of the Church. It's more complicated than that, but again, 20 minutes.
Eugene the Fourth.
That seems like a good summary. Yes, Eugene the Fourth.
Yes.
So we reef with these. My favorite ones are we haven't even said my favorite ones yet.
Okay, well we're like halfway through now. So yes, Eugene the Fourth. This is a part of the Council of Florence. So Eugene the Fourth is the guy who did this. And this is another thing that I quote a lot. That is the Catholic Church, firmly believes, professes, and proclaims that those not living within the Catholic Church, not only pagans, but also Jews, heretics, and schismatics, cannot become participants in eternal life, but will depart into everlasting fire, which is prepared for the devil and his angels, unless before the end of life the same have been added to the flock, and the unity of the ecclesiastical body is so strong that only those remaining in the sacraments of the Church of the Church of benefit for salvation and do fasting and almsgiving and other functions of piety and exercises of Christian service produce eternal reward. And no one, whatever almsgiving he has produced, even if he shed blood for the name of Christ, can be saved unless he has remained within the bosom and unity of the Catholic Church. So again, pretty strong language about outside the Church there's no salvation. To summarize that, this is again a remnant of my original plan. But yes, this is something I like to quote a lot, and I guess I don't think I need to get too much into what exactly the document says. But the reason I quote this a lot is people may not believe this, but I think of myself as an extremely ecumenical guy. I have a lot of Protestant friends. I love Protestants. No one loves Protestants more than me. I read Protestant stuff regularly. I'm a big fan of Douglas Wilson. I in general, I like the Reformed tradition quite a bit. I think Luther kind of sucks, to be honest. And I think my praising of the Reformed tradition should be evidence that I'm not saying that for partisan reasons. I think Luther just doesn't seem like a very good theologian from what I've read from him. But I find the Reformed tradition in particular something really, really intriguing. R.C. Sproul is great. There's a lot of Protestant authors I like. But I still quote these things, and the reason I quote these things is to make clear that I still think the denominational distinctives are really important. And I even think they can be salvation issues. Now, to be clear to Protestants, I'm not saying that all Protestants are going to hell. I very much hope that Protestants will be found to be invisible members of the Catholic Church if they die outside of the visible Church.
Invisible. Like it's impossible. It's possible. It's heretical to say that only those visibly, everyone can see that they're in the Catholic Church, that they're the only ones part of it.
Yes, and again, what invisible membership means really something we won't have time to get to. But I want to assure Protestants, I'm not saying you're necessarily all going to hell. But all I'm trying to say is I do think these denominational distinctives are still very important, and something that shouldn't be glossed over.
Wow. Okay. Fantastic. Let's carry on because I'm aware 21st desperately wants to get to some.
I just want, but the other half of Eugene 4, I wanted to be like good cop in that moment because, because there are for example, Saint Gregory Palamas, he wasn't visibly within the church, but he's considered a saint now, possibly for ecumenical reasons. But the other part of the Council of Florence was super, super important in determining, explaining the Trinity, what exactly the Trinity is, what's the reality of Christ's divine nature and his human nature, his divine will, human will, the fact of whether he or not he had a rational soul. These are very important theological points that are implicitly in Scripture or implicitly in these other areas, but really had to be defined against the heretics of that time. So I would say that, this is why it's important, because it's like, if we don't have this structure, this unity, then issues as fundamental of that would fall away. And what's more important than like Christ's own, his own very nature, So that's why
the Gregory Palamas thing is an important point, because I know a lot of people are going to claim when I talk about invisible membership, this is some like Vatican II cope or something like that. The Catholic Church has always recognized invisible membership. Gregory Palamas is not a recent saint. He's been a saint in the Eastern Catholic Churches for centuries. And even like the Council of Florence in general, that was a reunion between the Eastern Orthodox churches and the Catholic Church, which failed, but it did actually initially succeed for about 2 years before the East broke off again. And the Eastern churches certainly did not think that everyone for the past 400 years before the council in their church went to hell. They certainly going back into union with Rome, believed that their people would have generally have been saved. They weren't saying we're wrong about everything, Rome's right about everything. So it is more complicated than just that quote that I like to quote. But yeah, so Rerum Novarum, Pope Leo XIII. This was a document from Leo XIII condemning.
Wait. By the way, this is the first like modern pope. This is late 19th century for everyone.
Oh wow.
Yeah. This was a attempt from the church to condemn both socialism and certain elements of capitalism, and affirm that that the market can be exploitative and that there are certain bad elements to the market, but that socialism is not a justifiable answer to that. This is really the beginning of what we call Catholic social teaching. That is Catholic teaching on economics. Of course, there's always been Catholic teaching on economics to a certain extent, but the modern incarnation of that is what we call Catholic social teaching. That only really started systematically in the late 1800s.
Distributism.
Yes, I mean, distributism is the attempt by some English Catholic authors to give a sort of formal economic theory to the more general principles laid out by Leo XIII and other authors,
particularly G.K. Chesterton, who I think wrote
G.K. Chesterton and Heller Belloc. But yeah, no, I mean, like Catholics do have to believe in Catholic social teaching. It's not optional. It's something the church teaches. But Catholics don't need to believe in distributism. Distributism is just a way that some people have tried to explain Catholic social teaching.
I see.
Right.
Okay. And
sorry,
and
it's been a flood of information. I mean, did you have
what is it about this document that is based?
Ooh.
Well, the most base thing about this document is that he affirms the necessity of ensuring that the sexes aren't mixed in work in a way that would harm the modesty of women. He also affirms that it is preferable for women to be to work in the home. So both of those are two very base things. Another thing that's very base is he specifically brings up the libertarian objection of don't these people, referring to workers there getting a bad deal, don't they choose voluntarily to have these jobs where they're getting screwed and they aren't making enough money to have a dignified lifestyle. And he, of course, rejects that and says that's not a justifiable excuse for paying someone an unfair wage.
Great. Next document.
Yeah.
Pope Pius, Saint Pius X. Ooh, so trad, so heckin' based. Everyone loves him. He's the one that everyone thinks, oh, he's based, trademark. So
Wow.
yes, that's true. I knew I couldn't not include him. That I would probably be killed by some trads for excluding him from a list of based popes.
And you and the trads, best buds.
It's true. No, I'm just afraid that I'd push them to a breaking point. I guess if I really wanted to annoy them, I should have just had Francis on there 10 times. So yeah, I mean, 21st. Do you have anything on this document?
Well, I mean, you had it. Well, actually, yeah.
I can go. So yes, yeah. This document is basically just condemning the secularism law in France from 1905. In general, I think just the most basic thing about this is the really forceful way that Pius X was willing to get involved in mainstream politics. I mean, of course, modern popes do get involved in mainstream politics, sometimes in ways that we aren't necessarily a huge fan of.
But not
but
just the
still,
politics of like talking, like the modern politics is just like talking about certain issues that are political. He was like the actual battle, you know.
yeah. He was directly leading a charge against the secularism law in France, trying to take like very meaningful political change, in a place where he didn't really have many allies. A lot of people, I think, assume that even during that time period, that Catholic countries were generally favorable to Catholicism. But by the time of the First Vatican Council, really the reason the First Vatican Council happened was because basically every Catholic country was hostile to Catholicism. By the late 1800s.
So the commies and the French government were like, you know, if you don't let us intervene in your papal elections, we're gonna take away your church property in France. And he's like, you what, mate? You what, mate? He doubles down essentially. So it's like,
Wow.
Yeah. That's really all I have for that document. So Saint Paul VI. Now this is one that I know. No trad can get angry at me for including the document in question, but for a bit of context, Saint Paul VI is generally considered the most liberal pope ever until Francis came along.
Okay.
And I think that's probably a fair assumption. I think Paul VI probably was the most liberal pope ever. But the document in question here, Humana Vita, it was a huge step in me becoming Catholic. And that is, the document is from 1968, and it was St. Paul VI condemning contraception after actually his advisors had told him to that there actually can be some way that some form of contraception is acceptable for a married couple. He rejected the position of some of his advisors and affirmed that contraception is absolutely never allowed for a Christian couple.
This is Settler. This is yours and I's famous feud.
Yes, and
Oh,
we'll have
man.
to have another debate on this.
Yeah.
But
a
8
discussion,
minutes.
a discussion.
So 21st, anything you want to add?
Oh man, of course I do. You know, because and then obviously Saint Paul VI is the later pope that finished the Second Vatican Council, and so everyone, especially with his like super progressive bona fides, everyone thinks it's the liberal pope with the subverted, Vatican Council cocking, submitting to the modern world. But then he puts out this document on an issue that basically just everyone would have been fine with. Like it's the most milk, like abortion. There's still some of the population would be against it, right? But contraception, compared to anything else, it's one of the most easiest things for them to cuck on. But he doesn't, and it's really like revolt against the modern world moment there. And what I love about him and Pope Leo XIII is that in their documents, they genuinely are doing the role of the church of conversing with the modern world in terms of these issues, of like whether it's the capitalism communism dialectic with Pope Leo XIII, or it's the issues of sexuality and human life and human dignity with Pope Paul VI. They're conversing with the modern world, which was the intention of Vatican II, but in a way that doesn't compromise with its errors. That really speaks in this at the dignified level of this is the institution that transcends all these eras and has eternal views on these issues. It's not just going to shift with the errors of every new generation that comes along.
Direct interruption of the generative process already begun, and above all, direct abortion, even for therapeutic reasons, are to be absolutely excluded as lawful. Equally, is any kind of direct sterilization, whether man or woman, permanent or temporary. And then it says, similarly excluded is any action which either before, at the moment, or after the sexual intercourse is specifically intended to prevent procreation, whether as an end or as a means. Is the general view here that procreation is a good and kind of God instructed
It's the primary purpose of the act.
thing to
That's
do?
what they're saying.
Yeah, that there are two ends to sex, the unitive and the procreative, and that intentionally alienating either of those is inherently sinful.
But you can just choose to not have sex,
Yep.
and that's not considered contraception.
Yeah, there's also natural family planning, having sex when you know you are least fertile. The reason that's permitted um, is because it is not perverting the sexual faculty; it is just restricting it to when you're least likely to get pregnant.
You're not changing the nature of the act in any contraceptive fashion. You're just doing the same thing, but
Yeah.
It seems inconsistent to me, but I don't think we have time to hash that out right now.
Well, oh man.
Yes,
Well,
after Lambuda submits to the Pope, we'll have another contraception.
okay,
stream.
but it's not just about like the document, like and especially the language you were bringing up with that section you were reading. It's not just like about like the pleasurable act or the specifics of this thing. The root of the issue is much deeper and much more profound than that, because it is about the nature and the dignity of human life itself, and what can be more important as part of a human life than the generation of it. The generation of the Catholic Church has a reputation of, we only care about virginity, we only care about everybody that's pure and asceticism and all that stuff. But in terms of like marriage and sexuality, the generative aspect of it is the most noble part of it, and it's also like essential in terms of dignity of, you are in a marriage, the meaning of marriage of giving yourself totally to a person, everything that you have, especially the generative faculty of yourself, and also for the good of the person that you want to have eventually. So it's not just about Kumarism and everything. It is about this like deeper issue.
Great, thank you. Yes, that's
Sorry,
helpful.
it's we're getting him right when he's like, it's late. He's done so many streams.
Well, partly I just conscious that we've got 5 minutes left ish. I might give you a bonus 5 minutes if you're well behaved. Well, since you have been well behaved, I would say. But I would love to like go back and forth and dig into basically everything that you've brought up. So I'm having to be self-controlled, and you're right. I also am getting a bit tired. Where are we up to?
Yes, Saint John Paul II. This is a very brief document from him where he definitively excluded the possibility of female ordination. Very very epic document. And for the Francis haters out there, I always have people telling me stuff like, "Oh, Pope Francis is going to like make women priests" or stuff like that. Pope Francis has repeatedly cited this document from Pope John Paul II and said that John Paul II's position on this is the final word. So I know. I mean, if you think you know what's going on in Pope Francis's head better than what he's expressly stated, you can feel free to believe that. But he has expressly said that multiple times.
So we're going chronologically, and number 9 was JP2.
Yes. So this document is from John Paul II, as I said, excluding women's ordination. I know 21st. You said you had things you want to say about those last few. Is there anything you want to say?
I just want to say that I couldn't find the exact article or the source on it, but the first journalist that was able to go in 1990 into the Soviet, like their KGB information centers and everything, they were saying, who is their number one enemy? It was JP2. It was the Vatican. It is the Catholic Church. It is not neocons that are the greatest opponents of communism, because the root error of communism is atheism. So it can only be remedied with true religion.
Wow. So you're trusting your theology to the communists.
I certainly think that JP2 did more good for the world than Ronald Reagan.
Now, there's only 2 popes left, so I assume the last one on the list is Benedict 16. I can't read Roman numerals.
You would assume that, wouldn't you? The last one is, of course, Pope Francis. Yeah, no, sorry. I mean, I put Pope Pius X on there to appease the trads. I had to include Pope Francis, in particular, a document that isn't even from him, which I know people are going to want to tear me apart for. But a document that was approved by him from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. That is, the CDF is the chief doctrinal body in the Catholic Church. And there's a dubia, that is a question submitted to them about whether or not the church can bless same-sex unions. And the answer from them was no. And they go on to explain why the church cannot bless same-sex unions. This was about a year ago.
Here's a quote. In one of the most overlooked passages, the papal nuanso said that Francis had told him that bishops, quote, must not be left-wing, adding that, when I say left-wing, I mean homosexual.
Yes, I also include that's different from what I'm referring to. But that is an article from Crisis Magazine, a Catholic magazine, on 14 politically incorrect statements from Pope Francis, which is a great article. And I won't have too much time to go through today, but there's lots of epic quotes in that. But yes, no. So the document I'm referring to is from the CDF. Pope Francis gave it approval. Now, again, I have lots of people that tell me that, like, Pope Francis obviously is secretly trying to get sodomy no longer considered a sin in the Catholic Church, something like that. Despite the fact, as you just read, him explicitly saying that that same-sex sexual acts are a bad thing. But this condemnation of blessing same-sex unions is not something that Pope Francis had to do. The church gets lots of dubias. It could just have ignored it. And most answers to dubias do not get explicit papal approval. Most answers just get an answer from the CDF, and then the Pope doesn't sign it, which means it's not authoritative in itself. But the Pope specifically chose to sign this response to the dubia, which means that it's an officially authoritative response that Catholics have to agree with the conclusion of this document. It's not infallible, but it is something that all Catholics are obliged to agree that the Church does not have the authority to bless same-sex unions, because Pope Francis specifically decided to sign this document. He could have not, if he wanted to not sign it, he didn't have to. There'd be no reason why he would be forced to sign this document. And many dubias, probably most, I don't know most dubias, but many responses to dubias do not get official papal approbation. So it wouldn't have been an especially strange thing if the Pope neglected to sign this response. So yeah, that's my Pope Francis defense for the day, I guess. And yes, and also AA. Another thing, because people act like this is out of nowhere that he did this. The document itself quotes a prior statement from Pope Francis on this very issue from a previous from a previous document of his called Amoris Laetitia. The quote it quotes is, "There are absolutely no grounds for considering homosexual unions to be in any way similar or even remotely analogous to God's plan for marriage and the family." That's a quote from one of Pope Francis's encyclicals. I think Amoris Laetitia is an encyclical.
Yeah, okay. So he's very based, and he's against sodomy.
Yeah. So that's it for Pope Francis. 21st. Do you have anything else?
I mean, I just love it. Please, AA, please don't unsubscribe, please. But I think the church survives. Has endured all the popes. This could have been 10 worst popes. Benedict IX, I heard, was literally a sodomite, at least alleged by the other people, and how, the monasteries are filled with degeneracy and everything. He was a medieval pope and everything. So it has endured through all times. And considering that all the actual left-wing subversion policies that they want, including female priests, considering that has not happened over what has been 8 years, that's promising. And so I think the church will live on, and 100 years from now, it might be like Pope Caleb I, who will be the first African pope, and he's super based, and he's I don't even know what he would be doing, but it would be cleaning up the church or something, like Boniface VIII.
Wow, that was wonderful. I thought that was an epic list, and join me in a year for top 10 most cringe popes. Any last comments or thing? Maybe shill your channel or some such.
Yeah, I mean, go to my channel, Settlers Lament. Very soon we'll be doing Lambuda submits to the Pope. Very very soon. So yeah, subscribe. Um, I don't know. I mean, yeah, that's basically it. Pray for Elliot's grandpa, like I said at the beginning. Um, and I mean, yeah. Something else I wanted to say is I feel like this is bragging, and maybe it is, but today I got 2 separate messages from 2 different people saying that they had become Catholic after interactions with me or my content, and that was very epic and white pilling to hear, especially on Easter weekend.
White pilled again.
Yes, it's so true. White pilled again. So yeah, just in general, I wanted to say, I mean, so when I'm not, I want to be clear. When I say like stuff like submit to the Pope, I'm not saying that I don't like think that isn't a good thing. You shouldn't submit to the Pope. I think the Catholic Church was founded by Christ, and you should submit to the Pope. But just in general, except even though this is the opposite of how I said you should evangelize at the very beginning of the stream, you should accept Jesus and submit to Jesus. So just that I don't mean just saying that right now is going to that alone is going to do much for people. But I just wanted to reaffirm the importance of that for anyone who might be thinking about it. That this is real, that this is real stuff, that this is eternity stuff. And if you're not right with Jesus currently, as Saint Peter said, make sure you're calling an election.
Yes, I feel like between all the Christian denominations, we should be allies in getting people as far as submitting to Christ, and then it's all fares in love and war for the subsequent debates.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do.
Important as well.
I know we're really over time, but just another thing. Like, I get a lot of people that they'll talk with me and they'll be like, "Oh, hey, Settler, I'm sorry, I know you're going to be like really angry for this, but like, I decided to become a Christian, and I decided I'd become like Protestant or Orthodox or something." And I was like, I don't know what I don't know where you're coming from. If you're Catholic and you become ex-Catholic, I might be upset with that. But I've never been upset with people for becoming non-Catholic. That's I do think there are objectively things that non-Catholics are missing, of course. But I'm always very happy to know that someone has become a Christian. As long as it's not something like terrible like Mormonism. I'm always very happy to hear that someone's become a Christian. I've never been upset because someone didn't become Catholic.
And likewise, I concur. If somebody moves from degenerate atheism to wonderful, a wonderful, chaste and Christ-pilled Catholic existence, then that is a thing to be celebrated. Great. I've just remembered, at the end of every stream, I'm reading a little passage from the Passion narratives of one of the Gospels. So, unless you have any final comments, I'll take it away.
Remember to subscribe to 21st's channel too.
No. Subscribe to Lambda, because these Lampsters, it was a success. Leave and declare victory.
Do you know what I discovered during the stream? I now have more subscribers on Lambda, the channel you're currently watching, than Lambda Bible Studies. I have achieved in 4 days what I couldn't achieve in 2 years on my channel that I care more about. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Interviewing works. And remember, even Aquinas said, to bring it back to the very beginning of what you said about all the confusion, all the overwhelming autism of religious autism and particularisms, it is more virtuous to love God than to know him. So although it's important to be in the right place and believe the right things, it's always starting with loving him and sincerely asking for the grace, because it's not us that through our own autism gets the right conclusion. It is through asking him humbly to help us along. So thanks, Lambert.
Very well said. And when they led him away, they laid hold upon one Simon of Cyrene, coming from the country, and laid him on the cross to bear it after Jesus. And there followed him a great multitude of the people, and of women who bewailed and lamented him. But Jesus, turning unto them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming, in which they shall say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bare, and the breasts that never gave suck. Then shall they begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, Cover us. For if they do these things in the green tree, what shall be done in the dry? And there were also 2 others, malefactors, led with him to be put to death.